What's up, Eagles fans? Welcome into the All-22 review driven by AAA. I'm Fran Duffy, joined by NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell. The Eagles fall in overtime to the Tennessee Titans down in Nashville, 26-23. We've got a few plays to break down here. We'll start in the first quarter with a defensive stop. Not a pretty game for the Eagles, but let's break down some film. So Tennessee gets the ball to start this game. They go down the field. They go up 3-0. On the second possession, the Eagles force a 3-and-out. And on third down, Greg, we saw what was really kind of a prevalent theme throughout the course of the first quarter. A lot of blitzing here from Jim Schwartz.
More so than we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about this is I believe this was a zero blitz, Fran, where they were going to rush 6 and match up man-to-man with the other 5 defenders against the 5 eligible receivers.
Yep.
And we can just sort of start this and see how it goes a little bit, just to get a feel for that, because what's going to happen here is you're going to see Corey Graham and you're going to see Nigel Bradham right here. Graham's walking up. He's going to be a blitzer. He's right next to Nigel Bradham, who's also going to be a blitzer. And they're going to add into the D-line rush, so you'll have 6 pass rushers by design, which means you're matching up 5 defensive players against 5 eligible receivers. So this is what we call a zero blitz. So let's run this and see what happens. You're going to see 6 rushers. There's Graham and Bradham, and stop it right here. Now, you're seeing Jordan Hicks. He looks like he's a rusher too, but he's not part of the design of the pressure because no one rushes 7 because you have to match up to 5 eligibles. The reason he added in is because the back, Dion Lewis, had to pass protect. So what Hicks is doing is what we call a green dog. He has the back man-to-man, but when the back becomes part of the pass protection, you can add in as a pass rusher, and you get the 7th rusher. So we can let this play, and you'll see what happens. They get the sack. A lot of pressure there. When you get 7 into the pass rush, that's a lot of pressure. Very tough for an offensive group to handle that.
Yeah, and certainly what it helps create is one-on-ones for your defensive lineman.
Yes.
Michael Bennett is the one that comes up with a big play.
Yep.
So an outstanding start there for this Eagles defense. 3-0 there at the end of the first quarter. Titans ahead. All right, so the Eagles are down now 3-0 late in the second quarter, and they get a big touchdown here from Carson Wentz to Jordan Matthews. And Greg, this really just goes back to what you and I talked about on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast this week about the staple coverages of Mike Vrabel and this Tennessee Titans defense. One of the things they love to do is play quarters coverage on the back end. For everybody here, explain what quarters coverage is in layman's terms and what we're going to see from the Titans here.
Quarters or cover 4 is basically what we call an umbrella coverage because you've got 4 defenders, the 2 corners and the 2 safeties who are essentially deep players, each responsible for a quarter of the field. Hence the name quarters. That's what quarters coverage is. Now, there are certain ways you can attack quarters coverage based on the responsibilities of the safeties and the corners. And the Eagles, on this particular play, the touchdown to Jordan Matthews, did an outstanding job of attacking and breaking down the coverage.
Okay, so tell us, what is the key here that makes this play go?
Well, when you have 2 receivers to one side, the way this works is there's Jordan Matthews, there's Dallas Goedert. Now keep in mind, because each defender, and let's stay to that side, the top side of the field, Fran. So what you have is Kenny Vaccaro. He's the safety right there. He's responsible for the inside receiver of the 2 receivers, Goedert. If he starts to run vertically at Kenny Vaccaro, that's attacking Kenny Vaccaro's quarter of the field. So he's responsible for him. At the same time, Jordan Matthews, when he attacks vertically, Malcolm Butler is responsible for him. That's his quarter of the field. So what you can do is you can put this defense in a bind because it's still at its core a zone coverage. So corners tend to play with what we call outside leverage, meaning Malcolm Butler will play outside of Jordan Matthews, giving up the post because he can potentially get help from Vaccaro. But when you attack Vaccaro with Dallas Goedert, and let's run it now and see how this works after that explanation, you'll see Goddard's running vertically right about here. See, he ran vertically, a good, 10, 12 yards? So now Kenny Vaccaro basically locks him up as if it's man-to-man because Goddard ran vertically far enough that they needed now to match up man-to-man. But what did we say on the outside? Now you have Jordan Matthews running to the post, the safety's gone, and it's an outside leverage corner.
Yep.
So there's no one that can help Malcolm Butler here. The post is clean. And this hey, maybe the Eagles anticipated quarters coverage. We don't know that, but they got it. And if you run this play out, this turned out to be a classic quarters beater because there's no one over the top. And the reality was in the first half, Carson Wentz was throwing the ball exceptionally well. He couldn't have handed it to Jordan Matthews any better than that.
Yeah, I think you look at Carson, and last week things were a little bit slow. He's getting accustomed to the speed of the game. He came out of the locker room here on Sunday against Tennessee just on fire. Everything was on point. Yep. The timing, the rhythm, the accuracy, and ball placement, just outstanding. So after the Jordan Matthews touchdown, the Eagles are up 7-3. Tennessee's got the ball, and they're thinking maybe we'll try and drive the ball down the field, get some points before halftime. But the Eagles defense has another thing in mind here, Greg. They get a big turnover, an interception for the rookie Avonte Maddox. But this is a great example of just the rush and the coverage married together to turn into a big play.
Yeah, they work together really, really well. But you know what was so interesting about this play is who's the single high safety here, Fran? That's Avonte Maddox, who was a corner at Pitt and has played some slot corner for the Eagles. But here he's playing deep safety. Now, the Eagles are playing a zone coverage here. It's really a three-deep umbrella. And we've seen this a lot where the single high safety, and here it's Maddox, as we said, he's not playing overly deep because as this play starts, you'll see he's not really retreating. And we've seen the Eagles play this coverage quite a bit. I call it cover three robber with that deep safety sort of sitting a little bit. I don't know what they call it, but that's what happens here because this is clearly a zone coverage. And an important player here is Jordan Hicks, who does a really nice job of getting underneath the route where Marcus Mariota wants to throw the ball.
Yeah.
And he does a really good job taking away the passing lane because that's where Mariota does want to go. But if we lose that and start to run it a little bit, you're going to see exactly what you were talking about with how the pass rush marries up. Because if you freeze it right about here, this is perfect. Because ultimately, where does Mariota want to go, Fran? He wants to go right there on the in-breaking route. And you can see Hicks is sitting right there, and because it's a zone coverage, he's not carrying that vertical route that's right in front of him. He's not carrying that. It's zone. It's not man.
Yep.
So he's sitting right in the passing lane. And now, hey, maybe if you don't have Fletcher Cox, one of the best defensive tackles in the league, pushing back Quentin Spain into the pocket, maybe Mariota has time to come off that, look elsewhere, but he feels that pressure right in his lap, and we can run this now, and you can see exactly what happens. He needs to let the ball go. Hicks is right there. Maddox is sitting right there, and we get the pick, a big play.
Yeah, no question. So you get Avonte Maddox playing a little bit of a position that we haven't seen him yet play so far throughout his Eagles career. You get the great rush from Fletcher Cox. You get the great job in coverage from Jordan Hicks as well. A lot of different layers to this play.
Good elements, good elements.
No question. So the Eagles get a field goal off of this turnover, go into the locker room up 10-3. So the Eagles go into halftime up 10-3. They get the ball. They go on a 12-play drive, go up 17-3 with a touchdown reception by Alshon Jeffrey. But the Titans come marching back. They end up winning this game in overtime. Not a great result here. Not great. Great second half for this Eagles football team. Let's start, Greg, really on one side of the ball. Let's start on offense. What stood out to you from the loss?
Well, and I think it's been continuing for a few games. I think there's been some offensive line issues in pass protection.
Yep.
And I think that really is going to have to be cleaned up. Obviously, coming off last season when the Eagles clearly had one of the best offensive lines in the league in terms of production week in and week out, this season has not been anywhere near as clean, and we've seen the last 2 weeks with Carson Wentz, not only the number of sacks, but just the amount of pressure that's consistently been on him in these two starts since he's come back, and they're going to have to get that cleaned up.
Yeah, certainly something we talked about on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, as well as on Eagles Game Plan, was just the pressure scheme brought by Tennessee, and that was clearly an issue for this Eagles offense. And then defensively, what stood out to you from the loss?
Well, I think another thing that stood out today was lack of a consistent pass rush. Another thing that was seen as a real strength of this team. It certainly was a year ago in the Super Bowl season. This is a team that last year did not blitz a high percentage. They blitzed very selectively. We saw today, particularly early in the game, a lot more blitz, but they sort of settled down. Obviously, when you get a 14-point lead in the second half, you don't feel like you have to blitz and perhaps compromise coverage. But the front four, the four down linemen, did not really put the kind of consistent pressure on Marcus Mariota that you would have liked to have seen.
No question. The loss of Rodney McLeod on the back end certainly felt as well.
I think that was absolutely critical. You know, until you and I really break down the tape, we don't have the exact answers for that.
Yep.
But I think it was pretty evident that Rodney McLeod was sorely missed today.
Yeah, the Eagles don't have long to hang their heads. This is obviously going to be a tough test each and every week. Minnesota Vikings come to town, and they're going to be raring to go.
They're going to be a little angry.
No question.
Yeah.
After 2 straight losses and a long week themselves, they'll be ready to go. So stay tuned for more here on PhiladelphiaEagles.com for continuing coverage both of this game as well as previewing next week's matchup against Minnesota. For Greg Cosell, I'm Fran Duffy. You're watching All-22 Review, driven by AAA.